Will the cornerbacks silence the doubts?
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. We're continuing along in our football position preview series. Now we are discussing the cornerbacks. A lot of questions surrounding this year's group. The main one, will this group silence the doubts? Who steps up? What does the depth chart potentially look like? We'll try to answer all of those questions and more. This is the one of the final two position previews. Cornerbacks today, and then safeties will probably be on Thursday if my scheduling holds true. There will be a weekly mailbag tomorrow, and then safeties preview on Thursday before we wrap the week up. But nonetheless, there are more questions about the cornerbacks position this upcoming season than there are potentially about any of the other positions on the roster. And I think that there are a couple reasons for that. The first one is, if you go back to this time last year, the hype surrounding the Cardinals secondary was through the roof. I mean, Quincy Riley, Corey Thornton, Taz Nicholson, like you had some really good players in that room. And what happened during the season is that the group really didn't live up to the hype. Now, injuries were a thing. Quincy Riley got hurt. And it wasn't just the secondary, right? The defensive woes were because of the front seven, the secondary, and coaching all the same. But when you sort of look into the issues with the defense, and this was the 100th ranked defense when it comes to passing yards allowed, 236.6. 64th in total defense, 56th in scoring defense. Now, again, it might be unfair to point out the cornerbacks as one of the reasons why, or as one of the main reasons why this defense didn't live up to expectations in 2024, when really it's more of a complex issue than that. However, I mean, you could just tell by watching the team last year that the cornerbacks struggled. Now, was it due to personnel? Quincy Riley got hurt. You had some other guys have to step up. Or was it due to coaching? You could see guys out of position at times. It seemed like it was a slow process to get the calls out to, the red or green dot, whatever you want to call the captain, and, have the plays dispersed beyond that. So I think that it's not just a cornerbacks thing, but the main reason going into this season why this room has the most questions and has the most doubts is because of the turnover. The Louisville Cardinals they lost 6 cornerbacks from this room, and they only returned 1. They lost, of course, Quincy Riley to the draft, Corey Thornton, Taz Nicholson, both graduated. Jathan Hatch isn't with the team. Aaron Williams transferred to UCLA, and then Tayon Holloway. I know that we haven't really heard much about him since since all the stuff went down at the conclusion of last season. But at this point, you can't really operate under the assumption that he's going to play for the Cardinals because we haven't heard anything. So at this point, you have one returning player, and that's Rae'mon Mosby, redshirt freshman, who I do believe has a ton of potential. But you look at the guys that you've brought in, not one of them is transferring in from the Power 4 ranks. Now, that's not an indication that this room won't be good. Let me go ahead and make that very clear. It's just that there are more question marks heading into the season. Like, you don't have one bona fide, high-level starter in the ACC on paper at the moment. That doesn't mean that those players won't play into that role because I do think that that's going to happen. But at the moment, you have 5 incoming players. 1 is a high school player. 4 are transfers from the non-Power 4 level. And you return Rae'mon Mosby, who really didn't play much last season outside of the end of the year. So that's where all these question marks stem from. That's where, the main storyline is, will this group silence the doubts? Because there's a lot of focus on, well, can this room get it done? Is this room going to hold the team back? I don't think it personally will, but you can't fault anyone for feeling that way, because I remember going into spring practice and the spring portal, I asked fans in Discords and group chats and people that I knew, just because I was curious about the answers, like, hey, which position on the team do you feel like still needs the most work in the portal? And it was almost unanimous for the cornerbacks spot. So, and of course, this is the fan base, right? I would hope that the coaching staff knows more than the fan base, which they do. So I'm hoping that this is just, hey, program is trusting the scouting on these guys and hoping that, maybe Ron English refines some things and is able to, put this defense in a better spot heading into next season. But we'll talk about one player before we discuss the rest in the second segment. And it is the player that I feel like is going to make the largest jump, who's going to solidify himself as CB1 for this team. That is Southern University transfer Rodney Johnson Jr. Spent 3 seasons with the Jaguars program, 24 tackles in 22, 34 in 23, and 31 in 24. 1 interception and 1 forced fumble in that 2024 season. The reason why I feel like he's going to ascend into that CB1 spot is because, number one, I feel like he has the prototypical size that this defensive staff is looking for, those larger defensive backs. Rodney Johnson, 6'2", 200 pounds. But number 2, and probably the more important of the 2 reasons, is because he looked really, really good in spring ball. Like last year, he was, second team all SWAC, had a pretty, 40, no, that's total tackles. Sorry, I'm looking at this wrong, I think. He spent the first season at Stephen F. Austin. I was like, wait, didn't they say Southern? But yeah, he spent his first season at Stephen F. Austin, then spent 3 seasons at Southern. But he looked really, really solid in spring ball, had most of his run with the ones in scrimmages, and just felt like he had that physicality and aggression that you need at that CB1 spot in the ACC. So, I've heard from multiple people. Someone told me just recently that, hey, expect pretty large things from Rodney Johnson this season. And I think he's going to be able to make that ascension, that veteran presence that has played a ton of college football. Yes, it might not necessarily be at the Power 4 level, but we do feel like, that skill set, that size, that athleticism will at the very least mean that he will be serviceable at the next level, or I'm sorry, at the Power 4 level in this situation. The reality is that this is probably as by committee as the Cardinals will play since Braum has stepped in, I would imagine, but you don't really have a ton of depth in the cornerbacks room either. So you need those veteran incoming transfers to hit. You would rather them hit than miss at this point. And if you'll have 3 of the 4 hit, then I think that's a pretty good successful number for, the level of production that you're seeking in 2025. So I think it starts, in my opinion, with Rodney Johnson Jr. I think that he's going to be the number 1 cornerback, or the go-to cornerback on this team, at least to start the season out. And I'm extremely excited to see what he's able to bring to the table. But don't go anywhere. We're going to discuss the 5 other players, 3 incoming transfers, 1 guy that is coming back from last year's team, and a local high school product incoming freshman that also had a pretty solid spring. We'll discuss when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the show. Card Nation, first I want to take the time to tell you about our friends over at Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without all the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can spend on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a larger group to come with you. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And on July 4th, I was in Washington, D.C., and right before the game, I was like, you know what, let's go to a Nationals game, and got tickets to the Nationals and the Boston Red Sox for cheaper than they were a couple days prior. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And as always, thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that Locked On Louisville is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Continuing along in our cornerbacks position preview series, or cornerbacks position preview, not the series. The series is the entire position groups. This is just one of the 9 total episodes, 8 of 9, in fact. But I think that Rodney Johnson is, at the moment, CB1, or at the very least, like, top-line starter, like one of the starters. And then you've got the other 3 incoming transfers. And the other one that I feel like could be in line for a solid season is Jabari Mack. He has the most production out of any of the players. And give you the veteran presence on the field, but also potentially one of the better cornerbacks in coverage on this roster. He led the Conference USA last season with 11 PBUs. He had 2 interceptions. One of those was a pick 6. And then 2 seasons with Jacksonville State, 17 tackles in 23 and 32 in 24. But overall, that passes deflected number gives me some encouragement, as he's going to be able to potentially be a guy that could step in and at the very least give you some rotational snaps. Jacksonville State liked to rotate corners in and out, so didn't really have, maybe the counting statistics as other players. He was another guy that looked solid in the spring game. So Jabari Mack, I feel like, along with Rodney Johnson, potentially your penciled in starters for 2025, but still something to look for. The other incoming transfer that I think is going to play a ton is Justin Agu. He is from the University of Louisiana Lafayette, spent 2 seasons with the Raging Cajuns, 13 tackles in 23, had a pass deflection, and 36 total tackles in 4 pass deflections in 2024. Spent 4 total seasons, didn't see the field until his final 2. Didn't really shine as much as the previous 2 players that we mentioned in spring ball, but still veteran guy that you're going to have to rely upon to be at the very least. I keep saying at the very least, but like the Cardinals need guys that you can put on the field and they're not just going to get absolutely torched. Like that's something that, Louisville's season truthfully might hinge on how well the defense plays, because you know what you're going to get from that offense. Like it's a very high octane offense, but you need this defense to be able to step up and give you some really solid performances over the duration of this season. Now, the Cardinals did end up adding a cornerback fairly recently in July, Nigel Williams, 5'11" senior from New Mexico, had 36 total tackles in 36 solo tackles, 58 total in 2024, 1 forced fumble and 2 pass deflections. He's more so going to affect the game in terms of defending the run. I think that he's more potent in defending the run. There are some questions about how good he can be in coverage. Now, I'm not saying he's bad in that regard. I'm just saying that sort of one of those situations that I'm kind of in wait and see approach in fall camp, seeing how he performs and being able to diagnose that way. But those are the incoming transfers. There are 2 players that I feel like you also can't sleep on. The first one is the one that I think has a clear-cut path to significant playing time. That is redshirt freshman Rae'mon Mosby, 6-foot native from Marrero, Louisiana. Only had 6 tackles in 2024. Played in 2 games, had a tackle against Kentucky and had 5 tackles against Washington. He was one of the go-to guys in the Sun Bowl because of all of the players that the Cardinals had out. Now, he did get called for that absolutely bogus pass interference call at the end, which gave Washington another shot and saved their season. But thankfully, ball didn't lie, and Louisville was able to get the win. But I think that Rae'mon Mosby, a guy that played extremely solid, high school talent, I think that he is a player that truthfully can step up and give you a good amount of production. So he was a guy that had some first team snaps in 2020. In the spring. Had some first team snaps in the spring. But hey, yes, you have the incoming transfers who might have more seasons of college ball under their belts, but Rae'mon Mosby, who has been in this room, he has been with this program longer than any player. Hey, I wouldn't count him out. I think that the ball skills are there. He is able to utilize, even though he's 6 foot, doesn't have a ton of size, but he's able to utilize the athleticism and footwork to be able to make up for it. He's not a small guy at 6 foot, but not one of the larger cornerbacks on the team. So I think that Rae'mon Mosby is a player that you can look at and say, hey, watch out for him. He could have a breakout season. And then there's the high school prospect. Antonio Harris graduated from Louisville Male High School, which, of course, is a very elite high school that incredible podcast hosts also graduate from. I kid, but, go Bulldogs, proud Louisville Male High School alumni. Antonio Harris was a 2-way star at Male, early enrollee, 6 foot player, or 6 foot, 180 pounds, going to play cornerback for the Cardinals. And he had some really good moments in the spring. Made some plays in the spring game. It wasn't perfect. Like, he had some moments where, this guy, he's young. It's going to take him a while. But also, there were also plays where he impressed me. I won't lie. He impressed me. And he's got to be more consistent in fall camp. He's got to make more plays in fall camp. But I don't think that this is like a typical redshirt year for a freshman. Like, I think it's Antonio Harris is going to have to go through some growing pains, but he's going to get some time on the field, because for the Cardinals right now, you have 6 scholarship cornerbacks? Is that right? 6 scholarship guys, if I'm not mistaken, or no, 5. No, there's 6. Why did I think 5? Okay, never mind. I also think that Jaden Minkins, the younger brother of Josh Minkins, he's a walk-on, but got some run in spring ball, and I think that he could be a guy that could also fit that mold of walk-on to eventual scholarship player. So a bunch of different options for Louisville, but some of the players are going to have to step up. Let's take a look at predicting the depth chart, because this was probably one of the toughest predictions that I had to make in this entire position preview series. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Monarch Money. You ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a large purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO that gives you full visibility and control over your finances, because Monarch Money, it's more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. For me, I think that having everything all in one app makes it so much easier to manage my day to day. And also, I can keep track of my subscriptions. So there's not just random money coming out of my account every month without me knowing it. It's just a full transparency model that I love to have at my disposal. So join me and take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first year. Card Nation, just a little bit of a heads up into the schedule for the rest of the week. There will be the weekly mailbag tomorrow and the safeties position preview on Thursday, which will conclude that series. And that will be the final episodes of the week. We have 2 more episodes on Monday and Tuesday of next week before we end July. And then August, we will start episodes on Friday. So just a heads up into a little bit of the scheduling notes. But let's take a look at the potential depth chart. What would be my prediction in terms of who is going to start at cornerback for the Cardinals? Well, I know that we have that, slot corner, that nickel back, great band, by the way, that nickel back position that certain players can play, but we're just going to predict the ones and twos for the outside corners. And I think it starts with Rodney Johnson. I think that the Southern University cornerback is going to truthfully be CB1 for the Cardinals. I think that he's going to be a player that you're going to rely upon to guard the other player or the other team's number one options. And with the way that he played in the spring, encourages me and really makes me believe that he's going to be a serviceable piece for this defensive puzzle in 2025. Now, the other, I think, probably backing him up. This is where things kind of get a little interesting. I think that Justin Agu will be his backup. I think Justin Agu will back Rodney Johnson Jr. up. Of course, Justin Agu transferring in from University of Louisiana, Lafayette. I'm not sure that he's going to be a starting level guy, but I do believe that he's going to play a good amount, because you have to have him play a good amount at this point, because you don't really have the overall numbers to kind of rely on other players. So Justin Agu is going to be my 2 in this specific exercise. But on the other side is where things get more interesting. I think it's going to be like blank or blank guy. Like, I think it is going to be Jabari Mack or Rae'mon Mosby. And I know that most will probably predict Mack to be the starter. And I get it. He's got the most production. He's a really good defender in terms of being able to contest those passes and being able to read quarterbacks' eyes. But I think that Rae'mon Mosby has a ton of potential. And I think that he is going to be a player that rises to the occasion and takes advantage of more opportunities, to the point to where definitely going into the spring, I feel like Mosby or Mack for your number 1. And maybe even going into those early games, you have 3 games that you're supposed to win. I imagine all these guys are going to get some important snaps and important runs. So really, we probably should focus on who the starters are going to be for that Pittsburgh game on September 27th. Now, backing Mack and Mosby up in this case would be Antonio Harris. I think that Antonio Harris is, as a third stringer, still going to play in certain situations. That's going to be a spot that's, could, if all goes well and no injuries occur, could he be a redshirt candidate? Sure, but I don't know, man. Like, I just don't think that he's going to play less than 4 games. Like, I think Antonio Harris is going to be one of those freshmen that surprises people early on, and going into 2026, we're talking about him in a completely different way. So Antonio Harris is going to be my 3, backing those players up. And on the other side, with Rodney Johnson and Rae'mon Mosby, I think it's going to be Nigel Williams or Jaden Minkins. I think that Williams will probably get the nod for me because he's really good at defending the run. But the question you have is, can he translate that skill set to a higher level of college football in the Power 4, in the ACC? I don't know. He also has to show me what he can do in coverage. But he's probably going to get the nod as the 3, but Jaden Minkins got some run in the spring and had some good moments. So even though he's a walk-on, could he be a player that gets awarded a scholarship in fall camp, kind of like Chris Hughes at wide receiver? And now you're like, okay, well, Jaden Minkins is going to get some opportunity. So I think that you're going to get another this or that type situation. So I think that, to kind of conclude, Rodney Johnson, Jabari Mack, my starters. Rae'mon Mosby could also be in contention to start over Jabari Mack. Justin Agu, Mosby, Harris, Minkins, and Williams will all have an opportunity to be able to contend for those key reserve snaps. And I think it's really going to be a by committee approach for the Cardinals. Look, I know that we talk about this room, and the only thing we mention is the doubts, or most of what we mentioned is the doubts. There's potential with this group. Like, I think that this group, with the right coaching, being in the right spots, like, I think that this secondary really could surprise the rest of the ACC because there is talent. It's just a matter of, incorporating that talent into the defense, translating those skill sets over to the Power 4, and just overall being able to not be like defenses in the past that gives up so many big time plays. And of course, it's not just the cornerbacks position that is to blame for those big time plays. The front 4, the linebacking core, the cornerbacks, the safeties, and importantly, the coaching. Like, it is like the thing where, like, all systems need to fire at the right time, and they need to do so effectively. So I'm cautiously optimistic with this room. Like, I believe in the potential, but I understand the concerns. It's just a matter of, well, I'm going to wait until they show me. I'm going to wait until we see what happens on the field. And if the Cardinals can make some noise on the field, I think that this cornerbacks room can be one of the largest surprises of any of the position groups on this roster. But that is going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here for the weekly mailbag tomorrow.